Welcome, everyone. I'm Alan Levin, and this is another in my series of podcasts called Crossing the Boundary, where I have conversations with various people from different areas of activism and explorations of life. I particularly focus on how it is that people went through changes of their spiritual orientation, their philosophy, their sense of identity, culture, to become who they are now, doing the important work that they're doing in the world. Um, so today I have the pleasure of talking with Dr. David Ragland. Uh, Dr. Ragland is a writer, scholar, activist from St. Louis, Missouri. He's co-founder of the Truth-Telling Project of the Ferguson and Grassroots Reparations campaign, who he founded with Congresswoman Cori Bush. He's a lecturer at the Harvard School of Divinity and a founder of Cabello Black and Queer Intentional Community located in Western Massachusetts. So welcome, David. I'm happy to be with you. I want to just add that I met Dr. Ragland when he was a resident at the Community of Living Traditions at the a multi-faith community based at the Stony Point Center here in the Lower Hudson Valley, just about 10 minutes from where I lived then and live now. So welcome, David. It's good to see you again. I'd like to start, as I usually do with folks in these conversations, to talk about the roots of where you come from. That would mean your ancestors, your grandparents, your parents, and in particular, how you feel that experience in family and culture and community that you grew up in shaped who you are now, how it all began for you.
Thank you. And thank you for the intro. And it's good to see you again and be here with you. And just to share my story, grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and my dad grew up in Brownsville, Tennessee, where he was sharecropping with his family, and he picked cotton until he was 14 years old when his dad died and they came to St. Louis. They had to sneak away for fear because they were told they owed, like many Black folks, and potentially being forced to stay on the land. Um, and they knew they didn't owe. They actually always had a surplus each year because my dad's dad was, in addition to being a farmer, he was also a blacksmith. So he had, he was a skilled person who always had funds. Um, but this is so part of my history is directly from the American slave trade. And on my mother's side, there is, we're also part of the slave trade, but my mother's great granddad was Native American.
Mm,
And so we have that Native American strand in our family, and but also on my mother's side, we can trace all the way back to Cameroon to a tribe called the Tika people, which is known as fierce warriors in the Cameroon.
mm,
And parts of their land could never be colonized because of their aggressive posture toward the colonizers.
mm,
Um, so that's part of where I come out of. I come out of that tradition and being raised in a community that was similar to a migrant community. It was a migrant community, like we didn't always view this country as one whole, but different parts. Um, and even going from one state to another was like going to a different country.
mm,
And so just coming out of that experience, the folks that I grew up in St. Louis also came out of similar experiences. Migrating to, this border city, St. Louis, which is both northern and southern, but, particularly Midwestern. And we operated as a settlement community. And it was a religious and spiritual community that I think this foremost experience was that I didn't experience, but I was told about when on my mom's side, when they came to St. Louis, their house burnt down and the church that was nearby put them in housing and help them get on their feet. And they did that for so many Black residents. And it was just the collective pooling of resources. And so that collective pooling of resources extended to mutual aid. Um, Before we called it mutual aid, it was just what people did. They made sure you had food. And we were part of that. We were part of that because we always had a garden, we grew food, and we shared our food with any neighbor. I can remember once a week going to a different neighbor's house, bringing them a bag of collard greens or tomatoes or okra or whatever we had grown in our backyard. And so that experience is what pushed me into living intentionally, but also living in a farm community, in a community that was connected to land. And that horror from Southern terrorism of sharecropping, lease conviction, leasing the convicted workers to corporations. That experience, I think, particularly in I want to say when Trump was first elected, pushed us into developing community. But that experience in St. Louis, living with people and being in community with people who were living, below poverty levels, and still surviving and still being able to support each other in community. Um, I think it's the experience that I think shaped the current, like my current activism prior to Mike Brown being murdered almost 11 years ago. It'll be 11 years on August 9th in a couple days. Um, Prior to that, I had been primarily anti-war activism and engaged in the pro-peace movement, and teaching in similar ways in the university. And that experience led directly into the organizing in Ferguson, um, showing up in St. Louis on August 9th because it was also my mom's and my nephew's birthday. So I get there and all hear all the news about the uprising, and I quickly was pulled into it as a person who could support healing, um, a person who could support youth. And I also de facto, since I was, gainfully employed in the university, um, began helping Ferguson activists to travel around and speak and share their story, as opposed to being translated to through academics like me or you for that matter. So um, that work in Ferguson led us to begin creating a truth process as a mechanism for healing, narrative change, and narrative building. And we brought and attracted hundreds of of activists and people who have been victimized by police to come and testify and give a record and leave a record and participate in the healing practices that we began developing. And through that
This is
work,
the Telling Project.
yes,
This
the Truth Telling Project.
Telling Project.
And I think at one point we were working with Fania Davis, Dr. Fania Davis from Restorative Justice, Oakland Youth, also sister of Angela Davis. We brought them to Ferguson to support the movement, but they were also working on a national truth process to address racism in America. That work eventually was taken up by, I believe, the Kellogg Foundation, who started the truth healing and transformation process and proposed several bills as well. Um, in addition, that work led to,
Can I just ask you about the Truth Telling Project and those early stages? You said you brought people together to tell their story, and in what was that? How did that look? Was that done publicly or in circles of small groups of people that
oh,
just shared with each other? Or
so there was some people, so truth telling or truth and reconciliation is probably one of the newest tools in the global human rights regime toolkit.
Hmm.
And it's one of the newest, although the the underlying concepts and elements were always practiced all over the world. Like restorative justice essentially refers to the circle, and the circle is has a meaning around connectedness and equality, um, and we can see in many indigenous places where the circle was a way of governing, a way of addressing conflict, a way of healing, a way of bringing people in, a way of naming that harm happened. And essentially, transitional justice or truth and reconciliation was a result of um, the international community coming together to try to deal with all of the post-World War II conflict that was emerging primarily from the US and the West, supporting right-wing dictatorships all over the world. So, for instance, one of the first truth commissions was in Chile. Um, and we know about the US support of Pinochet, the brutal dictator there. As well, there were truth commissions in Peru. There were truth commissions, obviously, in South Africa. And similar to that, one of the criticisms was that although reparations is formally a part of truth and reconciliation, most people focus on the reconciliation part without the truth, without the repair. And that's why we focused and even named our project Truth Telling. And this was directly from what our community wanted. They were tired of telling their stories and not being believed, um, of having somebody else who publicly is considered more authoritative be the sole indicator for whether something is truthful or not.
these are stories, for example, about police
Particularly people
brutality
who are
or
sharing their
abuse that they
experience.
suffered from real estate companies or bank loans, things
No,
like
we focused it explicitly around police violence
that.
and particularly people who have been witnessed. And what we also did was we tried to bring in people to testify who we could corroborate. Because a big part of truth telling is truth seeking, where we find documentation to back it up so that the public can see, this is the truth. And we did that in Ferguson. We were able to bring in people where there was widespread documentation of the harm that they had experienced. Um, and even in those spaces, people are still not believed. Their stories are still denied. Like you saw it on a video camera, and still people are not convinced that that actually happened. Um,
How did the telling of the stories amongst themselves get
well, that's
actually?
not what we did.
Oh,
That was part of what we did.
uh-huh.
So essentially, we did these hearings in Ferguson. They were formal hearings, and the only people who were telling their story were victims. It was a victims commission,
Mhm.
and we were explicit because most of the other commissions enter people who are very hostile toward those who are telling their stories into it. In addition, most truth and reconciliation processes are post-conflict, meaning that the conflict has to a large extent ended, or the truth commissions emerged to try to maintain social order. We had different purposes. Our purposes were for healing and for documenting and for creating our own altar space for justice because we didn't believe that official participation would bring us to something meaningful. And this is evidenced by all the truth commissions where there are governments involved. For instance, even Greenfield, not Greenfield, but Greensboro, North Carolina, which was the first truth commission on American soil, initially, well, they never really allowed the city government to run their commission or to fund it because the city government was opposed and had a different storyline. In addition, the city government even tried to discredit um, that commission, and I've seen that firsthand doing advocacy work and supporting communities to create commissions. For instance, I was part of the team that did some early education for Portland, Oregon, when they were creating, after the murder of George Floyd, Portland, Oregon was working on creating a truth commission around police violence, and the city government was involved. And the way it went down was we were working with a community organization and the city government. And the city government said, well, we want to hear police first, then we want to hear the community. Um, and they put out a RFP or a request for proposals to run this commission. And they ended up hiring a group who had never done this work, but all retired police. And when it came out, they canceled it. And and this has been a similar experience with municipalities and governments when they run a commission. Partly they're afraid because they don't want new political power to rise up out of the people from those commissions.
Yeah.
For instance, many people who were part of our commission went on because they felt empowered to tell their stories. We had somebody who became a city council person, another person who became president of our school board, and obviously Representative Cori Bush is one of the most public people. She became a congressperson. But
She
yeah,
became a congressperson after
after, af-
participating.
yeah, after the process, and I think that was part of the story, but you
Uh-huh.
know what I mean. And obviously, everybody has complex stories, but
Sure.
and we see this too in other communities, like the the kind of political power that Reverend Nelson and Joyce Johnson, who started the Greensboro Truth Commission, they became their own powerful political operators who were able to move and change policy in Greensboro after their commissions. And I saw places like Iowa City, for instance, with its black mayor try to control and dismantle the commission by putting on commissioners who were incompetent or either completely against the process.
Yeah.
And
Can
so,
I ask you to take a step back behind these commissions and so forth and truth-telling project and explain how it is that you approach it in respect to healing. And also, from what I understand, you see this as a spiritual process, the truth-telling programs.
sure,
Um, what's
yeah.
Explain
So
how it's healing and what's being healed.
what is being healed and is or addressed is trauma.
Mm,
It's trauma, and it's never completely healed. But if you if one engages in truth telling in the right way, you're moving with victims or people who've been victimized, and you're moving with them as witnesses to the harm that they experience. As not a commentator, not a questioner, um, not somebody who's a devil advocate, but you're witnessing and accompanying um, people who have experienced this harm. The accompaniment is healing, that people care about it, that people want to listen and hear you. And often you got to understand, like, as we see now, one of the biggest tools of oppressors is silence. And so, getting people to be able to speak up and getting them to a place where they're relatively safe to speak up is a monumental task. It's similar to whistleblowing. Um, people don't want, um, or at least police who cause harm often don't want those people who experience the harm to get public sympathy. Um, so truth telling itself can be a healing process if approached right, because we're addressing and listening to and hearing the harms that are often core to people's dignity,
mm,
people's sense of themselves. Um, and if we don't believe it, I was in a protest in 2015. And in this particular protest, it was in New York City after Eric Garner was murdered by police officers. We were marching, and we were headed toward what's the place where they keep the big Christmas tree in New York City?
I know what you mean. I
Rockefeller,
can't think of it right
Rockefeller Center or Square.
now.
So we were walking through there, and when half of the group had went through, the police shut it off and started body slamming people. They body slammed a 16-year-old girl who was right next to me.
Mm,
And they also by a bunch of people they hurt. The reason why this became public is because one of the people they body slammed was a lawyer,
mm,
and she sued them, and she was also able to find under the sunshine laws that every single New York City department that came in contact with the police lied on behalf of the police in order to prevent a payout from happening or a judgment against the police. In addition, the girl who was body slammed eventually ran away from home and was so jarred by that incident and that abuse that she was dealing with substance addiction problems and hadn't had any issues prior to. So people don't actually, understand that. Like, I think we understand it for white people, that white people can have trauma after experiencing a traumatic incident, but we don't view Black people as having pain, experiencing trauma or harm, and our medical institutions surround that and support that. Um, for instance, in New York City, they were just recently tore down um, the statue of a very famous gynecologist Jay Sims, who experimented on and tortured Black women to create the field of gynecology. And this wasn't just like mild torture. It was abuse. People died. Um, so could you imagine your family being like the experiment subjects for someone's pseudoscience? And so like what we were dealing with in Ferguson, people saw police just as the tip of the iceberg of this larger structure of intentional, explicit, and indirect racism that impacts our communities. One of the other things is like a year before, or 2 years before Mike Brown was murdered, British journalists came to St. Louis, and they were going to write about one thing, but ended up writing about something called the Delmar Divide. It's a street that goes east and west, and north of the street is a Black community, south is white communities, and they intentionally defund the north and fund the not just not fund but defund.
Mm.
So and this happens all over, and you could even there was even a attempted legislation in the board to actually vocally say we're going to defund this because Black people are moving here. And then when we get ready to gentrify, we'll just take it back. And
Yeah,
that's what's happening now.
yeah.
So
So,
people were experiencing that, and Mike Brown's murder was just the straw breaking the camel's back.
so the work that you do with the Truth Telling Project, clearly I understand how it can be healing for the people involved, the people who have been the victims or been abused. How do you see it as relating to societal healing, the
Mhm.
healing of our culture that in a sense perpetuates the systems that bring about that kind of victimization and abuse?
Sure. Truth telling is according to Dr. Amani Scott. She wrote a book called Can Truth and Reconciliation Heal America's Racial Divide?
Mm,
She writes in the introduction, truth telling is the beginning of a moral inventory. So, like, as we begin healing, we have to look at who we are and what harm we cause, what needs to be healed. So, the idea of a truth commission is for the harmed and those who have harmed. But here's the crux, it's voluntary. So, you have to be willing to come tell the truth. And we saw this really poignantly in South Africa. But people came and told the truth because they thought many people were promised or with the hope of immunity. But also, people will use truth and reconciliation and focus on those things without, because they don't want to deal with reparations. People don't want to be accountable for inheriting wealth that came directly from the murder, rape,
yeah. So talk
abduction,
about reparations. Talk about
forced labor.
what do you mean by reparations? What is it?
Reparations comes directly out of truth and reconciliation. Is one of the remedies for gross crimes against humanity and human dignity. And after the conference on racism in South Africa in 2001, um, the definition of reparations was in areas of compensation, return of what was stolen, satisfaction, which is truth telling about what happened, changing of names on streets, creating public memorials, restitution. I think I said that already, but also healing, which is not just mental health, but also physical trauma that emerges from mental health. Look at the ways that Black folks have, environmental diseases like cancer from we can even see this with Elon Musk factories in Tennessee where they're saying like these data centers are causing cancer. And those happen to be usually around Black community. Harlem, for instance, has the worst breathing conditions because they put a waste plant, a waste plant directly in Harlem where all the other residents like fought to keep it out of there and said, yeah, let's put it with the Black folks. And it causes so that's and then the last part of reparations is guarantees of non-repeat. Don't do it again. Let's change some laws so we don't do it again. And we see there in reparations the undergirds of the Nuremberg principles. Never again. What must we never do to other humans? And so reparations is formally um, defined in those areas. And one thing I didn't mention is even the theft of religion. Like if you think about like the Africans who were brought over, who were stolen, over 22,000 ships, bringing more than 12 million Africans to the Americas. And I think part of what reparations does is it asks us to tell the truth about the past. It asks us to like reparations is, I think, a social, it could be so healing for our entire nation. What would people feel like once they faced the ghosts that continue to linger here? And instead of trying to lie about it, trying to make up some, story about what happened, what kind of country would we actually be like if we faced what we did and we were accountable for horrific past that continues. Slavery continues to this day, with some of the exceptions being in prisons when we know Black folks overpopulate prisons disproportionately. And we know that, look at cases like Khalif Browder, who was put in jail in Rikers Island and ended up taking his life, even though, there was not, he'd done nothing wrong and he had to prove his innocence from behind jail.
So many people, I think, have a very almost totally simplistic idea about reparations, and that is that every Black person in America is going to get a check. They're going to get a
And what
certain
if he
amount of
gets
money.
votes?
But so you're giving a much more nuanced and theoretical understanding of it. What does it look like in your mind or in your program's mind on the ground when we talk about reparations? What are the proposals that are being put forward that we could either understand and support?
So, there are political proposals, um, and Um, some of the political proposals you've seen in Evanston, Illinois, where people got funds for redoing their houses or to purchase houses. And then we also, so there are communities, there's probably more than 30 communities around the US actively working on reparations bills processes. One of them is Amherst, Massachusetts. The whole state of Massachusetts is working on a reparations bill. Kathy Hochul signed a bill into law last year, creating a reparations commission. The state of New Jersey just put out a reparations commission, a reparations report on their commission. California, we're seeing Bruce Beach, places that have returned. So reparations looks like whatever harm those people, was caused in a particular area. And they're different. And they go from past harm to present harm, you know? Um, so for instance, like I work, some of the work I've done over the years is work particularly with faith-based communities to create reparative projects and do reparative actions that are rooted in spirituality and the values that come out of people's own faith walk. And for instance, with one of the Quaker meeting houses in Philadelphia, they realized that they had uh, this large amount of money remaining in their budget, and they were in a primarily Black community. And they did research. They talked to people in that community, and the community people told them what they needed, what their biggest problems were. And they created a legal clinic and paid to free up um, everybody who participated in the clinics the entanglements in their property. So often Black folks lose their property because they don't have the legal support or fair or either legal support that's not trying to rip them off to help them clear up their ownership in their homes. And they were able to solidify property in the tune of close to $20 million worth of properties. And they spent, probably, $50,000 doing that work. So those are some of the examples when reparations isn't what white people decide they want to give back. It has to be commiserate to the harm. It has to be agreed upon by those who are victimized. And often I've seen white folks take advantage of that situation, even in offering reparations. And part of it is letting go. Like if you want to repair, if this is like if I did something to you, if I hurt you, I don't get to tell you when you forgive me, or I don't get to tell you what I'm going to give you to make up for it. That doesn't seem fair, does it? Seem righteous. Part of what reparations is about is why do you need to control everything? It's for white people as well. There's no such thing as a white man's burden. That is some imagined Superman, godlike thing that people have bestowed on themselves because of this social sense of superiority. And
Uh,
it
so,
and it
so,
weakens people.
so in
It
effect,
prevents people from asking for help,
right.
reinforces patriarchy. Um,
So
so
in effect, reparations should, if it's resolved correctly, actually benefit white people as well, because it would heal them as well from what they sense as either guilt or shame or and their misconstrued ideas about race itself.
yeah.
Uh,
I think it would heal our nation, and I think not just our nation. Like I don't see reparations on the just around. I don't see it as a national thing. I see it as a global project. Think about colonization and slavery. That too was a European project. Investors from every single part of Europe invested in slave ships, invested in slavery so they get a piece of it. It's like a publicly traded company. Let's go get us some money. This is how we can get rich and make it.
yeah,
Or whatever. And so there's like real like culpability all over Europe. Like, not just a couple nations can make 22,000 ships. I also think about all the ships that they made that didn't make it,
yeah,
that stole people and then they ended up in the bottom of the ocean.
yeah. Can I sort of change a little bit where we're going to get back to you personally and your own evolvement religiously or spiritually. I know you mentioned you grew up in the Black church. You grew up as a Christian, and at some point you made what is a pretty big change. You became a Muslim. Uh,
Mhm.
can you talk about what that was like, and was it a part of was it the Black Muslim group that you became part of, or the larger Muslim community, or what was that like?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, in high school, I grew up in a very much traditional Black church with roots of African spirituality in it. I didn't realize that till later. And in high school, I converted to the Nation of Islam primarily because our communities had been overrun by crack, and it was the Nation of Islam who were cleaning up the streets, who were helping to clean people up. Um, and I blamed, rightfully so, the white community for this. Um, we know that crack in the U.S. was a result of the U.S. Bringing cocaine in to finance the wars, the dictatorships in Latin America for U.S. interest. Like and so I saw the nation as a group that was militant and focused on supporting our people. And then in college, I converted to Sunni Islam, Orthodox Islam, which some people call it. And that was a long spiritual journey for me. Like I've even in later years, especially after my experience at Stony Point, moved away from Islam after, you know, like if you're an academic, like myself, or was an academic, you often move around, and I moved around particularly to small communities or mostly white communities. And the Muslims that I encountered there were often anti-black. And it's hard to worship in a space um, where you're looked at as the enemy, as whatever stereotypes they believed, that were fed to them about Black Americans. And that was even personified while I was at Stony Point, in that intentional community. Just seeing the way even some of the Muslims in that community were moving was deeply troubling to me. And around that time, I became connected with, it's like it just appeared in my life, like traditional African spirituality. And that's been my spiritual orientation.
Was that Louisa Tish that you connected with, or?
Yeah, her, but also a number of other people.
Uh-huh.
It was just a constant barrage of messages and people in my life who have made this transition. And it
Mhm.
actually, and a lot of this, like I had a dream about probably in 2017 about Black folks wearing white and going to the water.
Mhm.
And when I started sharing about this dream, it turned out that this is a dream that many other people had. And what it was is it was the dream was actually a ritual for Oshun,
Uh-huh.
who's a goddess of sweet water and rivers in the
Mhm.
Yoruba tradition. And many people had the same dream. Like it was just kind
Mhm.
of wild.
That's really fascinating. Yeah.
And, when we launched the
Like a
grass,
collective
yeah, it was
mind
a
was
huge
gathering itself.
collective. Yeah. And if you look it up now, you'll see that, traditional African spirituality is one of the fastest growing
Mhm.
religions in the West, not just among Black folks.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it was a religion that came with us over
Mhm.
during enslavement. Like, and particularly like if you were enslaved in Haiti, right? It might people may have known it as voodoo, or in New Orleans as voodoo,
Right.
in Puerto Rico as Santeria, in Dominican Republic as Santeria, in Cuba as Candomblé and Santeria. Um, and so this is everywhere,
Yeah.
in Brazil, like so wherever there are black people, this religion, and and even in this faith, I've met white folks who
Mhm.
uh come to this faith, and it's because it's an indigenous religion connected to the earth. And that's what I've come to understand and believe about reparations. I'm working on a book called Reparations: A Spiritual Practice.
Uh-huh.
And the book, essentially, the core piece is that um, we need something like that can help us deal with. Well, let me just give you this premise. There's a poet, two poets who have a line in their poems. And these are controversial poets, Amiri Baraka and Alice Walker. And they both have a line in one of their poems, and they ask this question: who could do such a thing? And the poem from Amiri Baraka is Who Blew Up America? And he's going through a litany of all of these gross crimes against human rights. Saying, who could do such a thing? Who could kill Kennedy? Who could kill King? Who would want to do such a thing? Alice Walker says, who could kill animals? Who could kill the planet, let alone people? And what I found is that people who have been colonized can. And I think that what people don't understand about reparations, it is to address colonized Europeans who were colonized by the Roman Empire, colonized by religion, colonized by the feudal state, women hunted down,
Say
called
what you mean by
witches,
colonized. Say what you mean
called
by.
witches to basically the process of colonization is removing people from their traditional practices to turn them into producers for the state. Sylvia Federici, in her book, The Caliban and the Witch, writes about the process that Europeans went through of removing women from the roles as medicine keepers and medicine women's and healers, primarily to create a subclass of people in the workforce whose only function is to give birth. Colonization is about comporting people from their own practices toward whatever the functions of an imperial state are. They no longer are free individuals. They're out of the quote state of nature, and they belong and they become subjects of the state.
Yeah, that's fascinating that you are saying that the European people, who most people think of as the colonizers, were themselves colonized, and that the liberation that we're seeking in the world includes the fact that the people that have been doing the colonizing in the last several centuries were themselves colonized, uh, and that's why they do the things they did. That's what you said. Who could do that? Who could do those things? And
And
so
it's to
it's a
kind of,
mindset of sorts, really, that you're trying to liberate people from, and I think we are trying to liberate people from. Um, I just want to ask you about something that I recently came in contact with a woman named Sia Henry. Are you familiar with her? She does a lot of work on restorative justice. Uh, but she's also involved with a group called MAPS, which is one of the major researchers with psychedelic substances and plant medicines. And She's trying to introduce, or not introduce, but help spread to some extent the benefits of plant medicines in the Black community. She's she's a Black woman herself, and I didn't know whether you were aware of any of that, or how you felt about that. Or you got muted somehow, David.
No, I think that whatever can help people reach some kind of liberation
Mm.
and address past trauma is helpful. I caution about like the psychedelics too, because like I think outside of the context of some of the indigenous practices that people use these
Right.
items, I'm all for it as long as there's context and as long as there's not appropriation,
Yeah.
which we see in the whole microdosing industry and
Yeah.
people taking
There's a lot of abuse. Yeah. Can I ask you how is it that your current spiritual orientation that is within yourself um, helps you in doing the work that you do on a political level?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Like, I want to finish a point that
Uh,
reparations, as a spiritual practice, is the process of disconnecting, from the colonial project and
uh,
capitalism and reconnecting to one's, indigenous practices or whatever earth-based practices that keep us in relationship to the land and to other people. It is it is essentially trying to address a broken covenant that goes beyond natural law.
yeah, thank you.
That is a earthbound echo like uh, position that suggests, I think, um, that we're in sacred covenant with each other as a necessary condition of survival. Like we all breathe the same air. We all have to drink the same water. You know, and there shouldn't be a hierarchy to people. There's not a hierarchy in nature. There's an ecosystem. And I think, given the nature of our society is a having relationship as opposed to being, or an over relationship as opposed to with, being with as opposed to being over. Like even the notion of stewardship of the planet. Like we don't have stewardship of the planet. We're supposed to live with the planet and live with nature. And there's a good book by Hilary Goval called Becoming a Good Neighbor. That's about her spirituality and about how reconnecting with the land and nature, in a spiritual sense, helped her to see herself as part of it, as opposed to someone who gets to dominate.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear you speaking about the ecological part of the work that you do and your orientation. And I think I couldn't help but notice that when you talked about your childhood, you talked about how you had a garden and you would share food in the community and grow food, and that now you're involved with some kind of work where you're bringing regenerative farming work to the world and to the communities that you're part of. Is that
Sure, yeah, yeah. I mean that's I think a natural outgrowth of the
Mhm.
organizing. It is how do we control our own destinies? How do we control our food supplies?
Mhm.
It's the basic, this is part of us. We're not waiting for a check. We're gonna build and do what we need to do so that our people can survive. Like it is clear. And it to me it's always been clear. I think some people needed this election to get clear, but it's always been clear to me that the design of this country was for our enslavement, use, and yeah, just continued, we're the batteries that this country operates on, and we didn't give permission. Um, these companies, these fast food companies are even hiring out people who are incarcerated. Is people are making a profit off of incarcerating. And I think part of reparations is in the spiritual practice is not just the connection, it is divesting from the places where currency or energy is put into. And that could be what we have in our retirement accounts. Is your retirement account clean of investments in prison, fossil fuel, war? Are the products that you shop at daily, are they free from prison, war, violence? Is a company invested in that? Is the grocery store that you go to, are they investing in companies that have been known for trafficking? Are they invested in clean solutions or are they invested in death?
Mhm.
And I think it's really is like reparations for me is real simple. It's about life or death.
This is where you talked about a moral inventory earlier, and that seems to be part of it, checking in on like what am I actually doing that is either supporting or the good and or doing harm. And so I wanted to come back though to my question, how does your own spiritual practice as you see it now help you in, I don't know, sustaining yourself, maintaining an open heart, maintaining the kind of compassion that's behind the ideas that you have about what the world needs?
Yeah. I think so, it's the spiritual practice that helps me see that white folks aren't necessarily the enemy, but they're also victims. They've been victimized along with us, and but not just like victims in any sense, it's victims that have been convinced to join with the people victimizing them to cause more harm. Because the lords and ladies and kings and queens of Europe, they weren't just all nice to their populace. They were victimizing and using the populations for their own wealth, and also investing in things that caused greater harm to the adventurers and the people that they hired to go out and run and maintain the slave ships. They enlisted an entire continent of people into depraved behavior that slavery and colonization was. It's an aberration of any kind of decent relationship or behavior. And so, like, that past must be healed. And reparations, like slavery and colonizations, offer us an opportunity for redistributive justice. If we look at resources as a global resources and look at how resources moved, right? How they were stolen from everywhere else in the world, brought back to enrich Europe and the people in the colonizers in the Americas and Latin, all the criollos, the people who settled and set up nation states.
Mhm.
What would repair as a process of redistributing
Mhm.
do to change our whole global economy?
Yeah.
And Olufemi Tawo talks about this in his book, Reconsidering Reparations. He talks about it as a distributive justice matter.
Mhm.
And I think it's a spiritual matter. I think divesting from evil is a spiritual matter. It is basic. Who are you going to be when you meet your creator? Are you going to be someone who passively participated in systems that benefit from death, murder, incarceration, miseducation? Are you going to be someone whose energy and whose life work, like working on a job and getting paid, contributes to life, educating, healthcare, fair housing? So it's like it's easy. It's easy and it's not easy. It's easy conceptually to think about. And on August 30th, the Truth Telling Project is having a divestment and reparative investment summit to, especially in this moment of boycotting, to show people that not only can we boycott, we can resist, because boycotting is kind of resistance. We can heal and build, which is investing in places like co-ops, in places that hire diversity, in places that are not invested in um, taking all the water from a Colombian village so we can have some damn Coca-Cola.
So, yeah, I want to forward along with this the video and podcast any of the links to projects that you're working on and things like you just described, so people can become involved, people can do a little bit more to support your this kind of work. But let me ask you something that's I know I think on everybody's mind these days. Um, when we talk about educating people about the past injustices, particularly regarding things like race, the treatment of indigenous people in this country, currently we're going through a huge step back. Not only are they, disinvesting, but they're penalizing places that talk about these things, universities and institutions and so forth. Um, so how do you feel right now in terms of your hopes for your children, for the child? I don't know if you have more than one child. I know you have one child at least. Um, your hopes for the future of your community, of your people, of the people of the world, when we see globally this reactionary uh, mounting of power. Uh, Things seem to be in some ways going in the opposite direction of what you've been talking about.
I hear that. But there's any indicator, there are I think to me as increased interest in people coming to me wanting to learn about reparations.
Hmm.
And essentially the way I feel is the way I've always felt, is that Black folks have always experienced and faced terrorism from this nation. We've always been subject to arbitrary behavior from law enforcement. Even the white folks in general, non-police, have been policified. Like they will, if you any indication of the videos where that hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. It is consistent with, and maybe some people are more emboldened. I don't care. I think that my issue is, especially right now, is I think this notion of this, this is a time to resist, heal, and build. Still,
Okay.
this is our only choice. That's how I feel. Time
Resist,
to resist,
heal.
heal, and build.
Mhm.
It is time, like when there's blood in the water, there's opportunity for us to build institutions for justice. When they turned down these universities, they were already neo-colonial institutions dedicated to the advancement of white supremacy. So the stuff that's happening is just part of what happens, and people told us this time was coming. People, I think I was one of the only people who believed Trump was going to win both times. I, I'm sitting around here. I live next to white people. I live with white folks. I see their behavior. When people don't learn, or people unwilling to learn, or unwilling to teach their kids the truth, this is what happens. But the truth is not, these kids are not going to put up with these lies. Teenagers, you telling somebody that critical race theory is what made the inflation high. What teenager gonna believe that bullshit?
So you have some faith in the young youth of today?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I have faith in the youth. Um, I think that they're gonna take the tools that were made to oppress us and transform them. I have the faith in our religion, in traditional spirituality. I have faith in our old gods that were stolen from us because
Oh, that's good
they
to
don't
hear.
want us to be enslaved.
Mm. Mhm. We feel we can get help not only from the young humans of today, but from the spirits of from the other side as well.
They are with us. Let me tell you what you asked me about my spirituality.
Yeah.
And my prayer had been, ancestors, give me that which you were denied so I can support and help my community.
Mm.
That was a prayer that I had for the year that we all got evicted from Stony Point.
Mm.
And within 4 months of getting evicted, the ancestors sent us $2.5 million to purchase that community, to purchase 99 acres with property that we could move into right away.
Oh, I didn't know about what community are you talking about?
That's Cabilio. That's where I live at
Oh,
now.
that's what Kabylia is. So say something about Kabylia
Sure,
before we close, because we didn't get to that.
yeah, as you know, we were part of a intentional faith community um, called Stony Point, which for a lot of reasons around white supremacy ended. And we many of us were confused, like, what are we gonna do?
Mhm.
And I went to my spiritual advisor at the time, and to some of my other advisors. And, one of them gave me a reading. It's called a Dilogun. And she gave me some practices to do. And we in the community did them together. And we saw instant, like just miraculous things happen.
Mhm.
Like, and we're pretty secretive about not secretive, but we just don't share everything about our community since we're queer centering and Black focused. But like, when I first mentioned, that we were building this community and I think I was speaking to the Interfaith Commission of Franklin County, the first check that we received was from the town that we were moving to. Like, there was significant people there wanting us there when we presented our vision. And we moved in every space honoring the ancestors first. Like, that is, for me, it's not just acknowledgement, it's about like, and that's what decoloniality is. It is like understanding that we are not just in this material plane. It is one where the spiritual lives with us, where the past lives with us. My understanding of reparations is not like this happened a long time ago. Time folds in on itself and is connected. Like, I'm a direct connection from slavery. My daddy picked cotton. That was a few years ago in his lifetime, and he's still alive. Or these Congress people who were like, "Oh yeah, my people own slaves, but that was a long time ago, and I'm not responsible." Well, you got the money from it. You still making interest off of hundreds of years of enslaving some people.
Right.
You
So
got power
Cordelia,
now because of it.
so Cordelia, can you just say, can you tell where it's located and what it's doing?
It's near Greenfield, Massachusetts, in Western Massachusetts. We're an educational institution in a community, and we focus on the issues of indigenous and reparative justice, youth education, intergenerational
Wonderful.
um, community building. We just recently convened a group of elders for a healing gathering, a healing and education gathering, and most of them have been political prisoners. Many of them had served time in jail for their political abuse, and they were all women. So we're serving our community. We're trying to honor our past legacy, and we're also doing youth education. We just brought in another group of families of people who have been incarcerated, with their families.
Mm,
And we all work the farm together.
mm.
Like this is a kind of work and organizing that we're doing. We're growing food that's going to go to the soup kitchen
Yeah.
in
So you're
Greenville.
really bringing it all together. All of your visions are coming together right
It
there.
is, it is, it is hard to act out here and live on your values. For instance, like at the farm, we have a list of the companies that we use.
Yeah.
We vetted people who are invested in life, who don't betray their customers' trust, by getting their supply chain from places that are enslaved, basically, or forced labor. So
All right,
that's
well,
part
David,
of who we are and what we're building.
I'm glad we could finish on such a positive note. Um, there's a weaving back and forth, of course, through the stories of the horrors, and there's as you say, the building that's going forward. So it's been good talking with you. I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about, but people only have so much attention span as well. So I try to keep these to about, where people will listen. I hope we stay in touch. And thanks again for coming. And those of you that are watching, if you like this conversation, if you're getting something from it, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and please pay attention to the resources that I'll be posting to stay in touch with Dr. David Ragland's important work in the world. Thank you.